Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at a new book from Mongoose for Traveler, Armies of the Fifth Frontier War. This is part of the Fifth Frontier War offering from Mongoose. They've been revisiting this important moment in Traveler history for the last year and a half or so, and this is another book in that series. So we go inside and we see that Martin J. Doherty is our author. Martin always writes a really good book, so that's great news. So we're going to take a look at what's inside this guy. So we get our nice artwork. I like the artwork throughout this book. It was good. Now we get a nice intro as to what the armies are about and what they're doing. And you think in terms of zones, not lines, because in space, no one can hear you jump over your line. And continuing on through our intro, more nice artwork. And then we look at theater zones. We get a nice description of theater zones. I wish they'd kind of put a black bar or something to tell us, because as you're reading the text, you just drop into this example mode, but you don't know it's an example mode until you're in it. And especially on the PDF until you are able to turn the page. There it is. I like these examples. I really, really do. I just wish they had been a little clearer, more clearly called out. Travelers in the military. How are your characters going to get involved in the Fifth Frontier War? That all depends on what kind of campaign you're looking to do. If you're looking to make the travelers decision makers, you make them high-level officials or politicians. If you want them to be rank and file, you stick them in the army or something in between. I read this book and I really enjoyed what I read, but it's more of a military SF kind of book than anything else. So if you like military science fiction, which I do, then this book is definitely up your alley. Am I going to use a ton of this stuff? Well, some of it. But it gives me a nice backdrop for what's going on in the Fifth Frontier War, which I'm using as a backdrop for my campaign. So I did enjoy this book. I liked what it offered. So we have how to walk around loaded up with soldier stuff. And then the rules of engagement, what's allowed and what's not allowed in the warfare. And then we get a nice look at military grav vehicles. We get a lot of nice ironmongery in this book. We get vehicles, we get weaponry, we get all kinds of fun stuff. For me, just the stuff like this was worth buying the book for. And there we have the field kit, Planetary Army of Jewel, Lift Infantry Soldier. That's what the guy's wearing. And then military campaigns. Depends on what you want to do with your military campaign. Are you looking to really replay the Fifth Frontier War or play it anew? Or are you looking for it as a backdrop piece? Speaking for myself, the Fifth Frontier War right now is going to be a backdrop. I'm not saying it will always stay that, but for right now it's just a backdrop of things going on elsewhere. Battles and firefights. And there's kind of a cinematic way to handle battles and firefights if your players aren't really prime in the battle, if they're just trying to get from point A to point B without getting killed. There's a nice little cinematic system to do it. And then here it is, if you're going to draw fire. And then we have the Fifth Frontier War, some of the doctrines. And then grand strategy, strategy and tactics. Strategy is, of course, what you plan before the war. Tactics is what you use during the war. They dovetail with each other nicely, but still. Attrition, that's something you want to get involved with. Network-centric warfare. Attrition means grinding down one side or the other till victory, and it's not a real economical way to conduct conflict. More nice artwork. Maneuver strategy versus attritional warfare. You want to be moving instead of just staying in place and grinding each other down. And again, another example, but again, I wish it had been called out a little bit in the writing. Made bold or put a bar across it or something to tell me I was going into an example. I like the examples. I like them a lot. I think that's something Mongoose has been a little short on. I just wish they would have called it out a little better. Maybe even as a sidebar. Continuing on, another example of maneuver warfare. The noisy fourth dimension. So the fourth dimension is going to be your electronics, your sensors, your radio, communications, anything like that. And how it's going to be affected or be effective during the war. Nuclear and biochemical warfare, those are actually banned, and nuclear warfare isn't all that usable because there's so many nuclear dampers in Traveler, it's hard to actually get a nuke to count. Continuing on, psionics. Now, we're fighting the Zodani in Traveler 5th Frontier War. So psionics should play a big part, and yet they're only briefly mentioned here because psionics are such a small percentage of the Jordani forces. I would like to have seen a bigger section on psionics myself because I think that's the unique thing about this conflict. And then here's our military organization. I thought this book was going to be nothing but charts. It's not. There's a lot of meat for this book. The teeth and tail. The teeth, of course, the fighting front, and the tail is the logistical end. And then we're going to look at infantry formations. I'm assuming this is all the symbols, light infantry, heavy infantry. I'm assuming those are all inner sphere designations, but we're not really told. Artillery formations. Cavalry formations, this would be tanks, not horse-mounted. Aerospace formations, and again, I'm assuming that these are all inner sphere formation designations and not anybody else. Marine formations, the rank in military tradition, and this compares the Third Imperium to the Jordani. And there you go. These are the Imperium/Darien, there's the Jordani, and there's the Sword Worlds. And again, I'm not sure whose this is. I think it's the Third Imperium/Darians, but I'm not sure. And then officer rank equivalent. And then some more general officer equivalency. Weapons and equipment. This is where the book shines. There's a lot of good toys in here. Tools and enablers, there you go. Obscurance, so you can shoot smoke or any kind of mist to obscure your movements. Battle management systems, decoys, drones, all kinds of goodies in this thing. This book was worth it just for this stuff. I really like how it's called out. I like the way it's shown here. Military sidearms, just very nice. Imperial small arms, the ACR family. And then Sword Worlds, small arms. Anti-armor and aerospace defense. This is where your Mason batteries come in, amongst other things. Some rockets. Low gravity weapons, which I do like because you're going to need them if you're capturing Imperial worlds. Some of the worlds are just asteroids or moons. They have very low gravity. You've got to be able to fight in that environment. Imperial Marine weapons. Imperial Army personal armor. There we go. I always like this stuff. I realize that a lot of this is similarly presented in the Central Supply catalog, but I like it in the situation, in the setting of the military. I just think that kind of pulls it out a little bit and narrows the focus. Then we get the Jordani personal armor, Sword World's personal armor, and then the Imperial battle dress. There we go. Some more looks at battle dress, Jordani battle dress, support and vehicular weapons. I liked some of these. These were nice. I could see some of the individual pieces here being brought into my game. Maybe it's something that's, there's a rebellion going on a planet my players are going to be involved with, and some of this material is captured and being used. So this is definitely a use for this book. Vehicle mounted projectile weapons, artillery rocket systems, artillery mass drivers, all kinds of goodies in here. Battlefield energy weapons. You get your FGMP, your fusion gun, man-portable. You get all kinds of just fun toys. Aerospace defense weapons. Again, we get another example. I like the examples. I really, really did. Close-in defense, point defense. There you go. Continuing on. And if it seems like this is mostly weaponry, it is. There's a lot of it. Now we get a look at the unified armies of the Imperium and how they're set up. Imperial equipment and armament. This is really what I kind of wanted to see, the Imperial Marine Corps. These topics have been dealt with forever in Traveler. I remember some of the earliest articles I read being on some of these topics, but I still like the fresh take on it, especially 40 plus years later, where weaponry has changed dramatically in our real world and is reflected in this book. Personal force of the nobles, those are the Huscarls, House Carls, Bry's light grav vehicle. There you go. That could be something maybe the travelers end up coming across or capturing. Sector and subsector commands, very important to this. This is also what I wanted for this book. We've gotten a look at this a few times already, but I don't mind dialing in on stuff like this, especially important worlds like Jewel, Regina, Aramis, Villis, very important worlds, and it's good to know what they have to defend those worlds. Rylander, and then we get a look at the sword worlds down in the Five Sisters area. And then small unit organizations. This is actually the infantry. There's some more, another example. A lift infantry platoon. And another example. Again, I just wish these had been called out a little bit so I could have known as I was reading that I was going into an example. That's my personal preference. This is what I expected the book to mainly consist of, and it doesn't. There's only a few sheets like this in here, which I do appreciate. Another example. The Tirana family of grav vehicles. And there you go. Lift Infantry Battalion. Danube Light Grav Tank. There you go. Artillery Battery, Aerospace Defense Regiment. Conchetta Artillery Sled. There you are. This thing's got for its weapon is a mass driver gun howitzer. That's pretty powerful. Armored Grav Tank Squadron. And then we get a look at some nice grav tanks. Also something I always love in Traveler. And the Teamster Logistic Vehicle. This is just taking materiel, not personnel, and not fighting. It's going into areas of conflict though, so it's got to be armored. Imperial Army Armored Brigade. Composite Aerospace Warfare Brigade. The Mongoose Attack Speaker. I wonder if that was named on purpose. I would. Alligator Grav Gunship. There we are. Imperial Army Division Lift Infantry. These are mechanized troopers. The Corps of Rangers, the Imperial Marine Corps. And now we get to the armies of the Jordani Consulate. We're at page 126 of about 175. So, as I said, this is mostly from the Imperial point of view. But we do get a nice look at Jordani Doctrine. Another example of how they use their forces. Another one. And then the system of 5. The Jordani are big on that number. And then force creation, committed forces. And the Jordani are a little more flexible than the Third Imperium because of their psionic interface with their troopers and things like that. They can tell when fatigue is setting in, when some troopers need to be rotated out, others can keep going. All very important elements of fighting a war. Jordani Consulate Infantry Group. Jordani Consulate Infantry Squadron. There we go. Another chart of organization. And then Combat Transport Vehicle. By the way, I love the Jordani combat armor. I think that looks so sleek. They almost look like insects with those big eyes on the helmets. I like how that looks. And then we get a little bit on warbots, not a ton. Jordani are big on using robots in warfare. We got plenty in the Jordani Alien Races book, but I wouldn't have minded one or two more here. Okay, and we get a militarized air raft. And then a light grav tank, a light artillery tank, planetary forces and occupation forces, higher formations. So again, if you're a sci-fi, military sci-fi fan like I am, this book was gold. I really enjoyed this. If you read Hammer Slammers or any of the Keith Brothers stuff from the 80s, even down to a lot of David Weber's non-Honor Harrington stuff, although some of the Honor Harrington stuff is in there too, would fit in this nicely. That's some of the stuff you're going to get. That's what I liked about this. I do read that stuff and I've enjoyed it. Special Naval Landing Force, the Consulate Guard. And then we get a look at the ground forces, the Sword Worlds Confederation. These guys don't get a ton of attention in here, but they're Tech Level 12 minor player. If you saw my video yesterday on who the Outworld Coalition is, you'll see that the Sword World Confederation is a smaller player. We get a table of organization for them. Urban Combat Battalion and Mechanized Brigade, Mechanized Division, and then the ground forces of the Darien Confederation. We get a nice look at those. And another table of organization. And then we get a look at a transport gunship. And then an index. An index in a book like this is invaluable because you're going to want to look up individual things in here as opposed to using the entire book at your table. So an index is going to be really, really helpful. I enjoyed the fact that this is here and it's so detailed. And then we have the back of the book. So that's it. That's a brief look at the Armies of the 5th Frontier War. There's the cover. I actually like this piece of artwork a great deal. Nice little close-in firefight against Jordani troops. I really like this. I think Mongoose nailed it with the quality of the book, the artwork, the layout. Like I said, there could have been a few other editorial changes in my opinion to tell me when I was going into an example, but I've always liked examples, and I've grumbled in the past about not getting enough examples from Mongoose. So I'm happy with that, but if we could just differentiate a little bit between the narrative and the example, my reading eyes would appreciate that, because I was halfway through the first example by the time I realized I was reading an example. I like this book a great deal. I think for sheer Traveler flavor, this book really nails it. This is what I love about Traveler, is this kind of stuff and the history and the background. That's really where I geek out. I geeked out reading this book. I enjoyed it immensely. So I think it's a very valuable addition to my collection. And when it comes out in hardcover, this one may make the cut, and I may have to buy it in hardcover. I haven't decided yet. But there you go. That's a look at the 5th Frontier War, Armies of the 5th Frontier War, for Mongoose Traveler 2nd. Let me know your thoughts, if you've read it, if you enjoyed it, if this isn't exactly what you were looking for, and if not, why not? I'm very interested in feedback on this. Also, please take a look at the Patreon, see if you can help me out there. Like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Tell your friends. Let's keep growing the channel. But that's all I've got for today on page 121. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.